All right. Good day, everyone. Welcome to another YES program. Today we have Matt Margolis talking about planning strategies for the caregiving child. As part of our YES program, we offer about 4 to 6 of these every month. We encourage you to tell your friends and family about these different programs. Today is planning strategies for the caregiving child, the new normal. It isn't uncommon to see an adult child put his or his life on hold in order to take care of an ailing parent. And in fact, this happens more often. This presentation will offer various planning options for the caregiver child and parent consider parent or relative to their new relationship. Welcome everyone today and welcome to Matt Margolis.
All right, good morning everybody. Good to be here, I don't know if I would say good to see everybody, but nobody's showing me their screens, and that's okay. That's all right. You don't need to. So today our topic is planning strategies for the caregiving child. Give you guys a little bit of a background on yours truly. So as Pam said, my name is Matt Margolis. My partner Lauren Weldon and I have we'll call it a boutique elder law and estate planning practice. Located in downtown Park Ridge. We help folks of all shapes and sizes and ages and everything. I don't care who you are, we are happy to help you plan. That is as young as 18-year-olds going off to college, putting powers of attorney in place, which a lot of people don't think about. Somebody just reached out to us this week about that, all the way to working with individuals in their 90s and triple digits, just making sure that either they have the appropriate planning in place, or in some cases, we're helping people protect assets, helping them apply for Medicaid, and on the elder law side of our practice, really just trying to help people, with all those issues that arise in that sort of that last chapter of life. Things can get complicated, things can get blurry, families can get stressed out, and so we're here to do what we can to help. And sometimes that's us being able to actually do the heavy lifting, and in some cases, it's just putting you in touch with all the other folks out there that can help you, that are not us. Because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with an ailing loved one, if you've dealt with this, that you really need a team to help support you. And we're happy to be one part of it, but we also understand that we are just one part of it, and that we need to work together with other professionals to make sure that the family is being taken care of. So. All right, I'm just making a note for myself so I don't forget something that I want to talk about. So when we talk about planning strategies for the caregiving child, there's such a broad, to some extent, it's a broad topic. There's various things that can come up. Every situation's a little bit different. So I'm going to do my best to really just highlight some of the things that we see more often than not in our office. And, I'm just going to go off the idea that because this is what we see more often than not, it's probably what folks are dealing with more commonly, other than any kind of intricate situations or details that obviously will apply to some people, but not everybody. I'm happy to answer questions throughout the talk. It would be easiest if you are able to type your questions in the chat box. That way, if I'm sort of in the middle of talking, you're not interrupting me, which I don't necessarily mind, except sometimes it just totally takes me off of I lose my train of thought. I'm sure some of you can appreciate that. And so if you can type it in the chat box, that would be great. If you cannot wait to ask the question, I would ask that you maybe show me your screen for a second and just kind of like raise your hand or do something to give me an idea that you have a question. I'll finish my thought and then I will be happy to answer your question. So planning strategies for the caregiving child. I'm going to talk about powers of attorney first. To me, I bring these up in a lot of the talks I give. So if you've attended some of my talks, I will sound like a broken record. I am totally okay with that. Powers of attorney are super important. To me, these are frankly the most important documents that somebody can have. We all need some sort of document that talks about where our stuff goes when we pass away, whether that be a will or a trust. But if we, God forbid, we don't have one of those documents in place and we're incapacitated, not only can we not create a will or a trust, but without powers of attorney for healthcare and property, We have nobody that can legally make medical decisions for us. We have nobody that can legally make financial decisions for us. And if we don't have power of attorney documents, then somebody that's close to us will hire a lawyer and go to court and get a guardianship. And guardianships can be very expensive. You're talking about thousands of dollars versus a couple $100 for powers of attorney. And with a guardianship, now we have a judge, now we have a court that's basically making telling us what we can or cannot do for our loved one that we are a guardian for. Okay, look at it like being like a court-appointed power of attorney. It's fine. At the end of the day, the guardianship is what somebody needs. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's not ideal. Having power of attorney documents in place would be very ideal. Okay, and so in Illinois, we have a healthcare power of attorney and a property power of attorney. Healthcare power of attorney is a legal document where I'm naming somebody to make medical decisions for me in the event that I cannot make my own. All right, I can name as many people as I want, but it's one at a time in a particular order. Right, so my power of attorney, for example, my wife, my mom, my dad, my brother. All right, it's in that order. If my wife can't serve, then the next person steps in. We cannot name co-agents. So the person that you name on your power of attorney, they're called your agent. In Illinois, you cannot name co-agents. Some states allow it. Illinois does not. For good reason, right? If a serious medical decision had to be made for me, the last thing I want is for two people to be arguing over what decision to make, even if I was very clear with them as to the decision that I'd want them to make. When we look at naming a healthcare power of attorney, I'm not going to go into tons of detail on powers of attorney. I just want to give you guys a little bit of a snapshot on them. But when we name somebody as a healthcare power of attorney, we want to make sure that they are comfortable making our decision for us. Okay, and that's really important, right? Because I don't want my life artificially prolonged, right? That's just how I feel. You don't have to agree with me. None of you have to agree with me, and that's okay. We're all entitled to our own opinion. But because I don't want my life artificially prolonged, I want to make sure that the people I'm going to be naming as my power of attorney for healthcare are comfortable making that decision for me. God forbid I'm ever in a situation where that serious decision has to be made. Right? Somebody might tell me, hey, Matt, I'm uncomfortable doing that. There's no way I could ever let you pass away. And that's so sweet to hear, but I don't want to name that person, right? Because that's not what I want. Okay. And so again, these are just things to think about. You need to name the best person for the position. I tell clients all the time, picking a power of attorney or a trustee of a trust or executor of a will, this should not be about not wanting to hurt your oldest daughter's feelings because she might not be the best person, or whoever it is, right? This is about making sure that you have the right person named to step in and handle things on your behalf. Okay. I'm not insensitive when I say that. I promise you, I'm actually a very sensitive person. But people really need, because this comes up all the time where clients are concerned that if they name their younger child over their older child is going to feel slighted. And I just tell them, you can't operate that way. You have to make sure you're naming the right person. Ultimately, when we're talking about making the determination as to when somebody's incapacitated or not, when they cannot make their own decisions, we're talking about this should be something that would be put in writing by a doctor. I'm not making the decision for my mom or dad. Okay, it's going to be something in writing by a doctor. Okay, not by a nurse, not by a nurse practitioner, not by a physician's assistant. This is by a doctor, by a neurologist. So either an MD or somebody that is dealing with, folks with memory loss. Okay, so it's always going to be something documented by a medical professional. The other power of attorney in Illinois that we have is the property power of attorney. The property power of attorney is a document where we're naming somebody to make decisions for us with respect to everything that's not healthcare related. Okay, who can sign a contract on my behalf? Who can deal with real estate in my name? Who can deal with my IRA, my 401k, my checking account, my savings account, my brokerage accounts at UBS or wherever I have money invested? Who can deal with Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid? Who can file my tax returns if I didn't say that already? My property power of attorney has a lot of power. Okay. Super important though, because if I'm incapacitated, life goes on. Bills have to get paid. My house might have to get sold. I might have to move into a long-term care community and a contract might have to be signed. I might want to hire a caregiver and a contract has to be signed. My taxes have to be filed. Super important document. Okay, we need this in place. Similar to healthcare, you can name as many people as agents as you want, but it's one at a time in a particular order. Again, you can name 6 people, but they're going to act one at a time in succession. Okay. And similar to what we talked about with the healthcare power of attorney, we want to make sure we're naming the right person. All right. Your son, who has a hard time managing his own financial affairs, who doesn't pay his bills on time, but he's a great lawyer or CPA, is not going to be the right person named as a power of attorney. Your other son, who's a stay-at-home dad, who doesn't work, but who takes care of the house, pays all the bills, makes sure the taxes are filed on time. When something breaks, he's hiring somebody to fix it. He's the better one to name as a power of attorney for property, right? I always say your property power of attorney should be somebody that's good at managing a household. Somebody that's good at staying on top of things, making sure that things don't slip through the cracks, okay? And I say this because inevitably my clients over the years have always will say, oh, my daughter, the CPA, my son, the lawyer, my daughter, the financial advisor. That's great that they're in those roles. But just because they have those sorts of jobs and those sorts of careers does not mean that they are the most responsible person. And they might be super responsible, but they might be super busy. You know, maybe they're working 60, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week. If something happens to you, they may not be able to balance their job, their family, and taking care of you. Okay. Again, I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying that when we're making decisions about naming people as our power of attorney for depending on whether it's health, I don't care whether it's healthcare or financial decision, I just want to make sure that people are giving it some thought and they're making sure that they're naming the right people. Okay. All right. I'm done beating a dead horse there. So, you know, when we look at, you know, sort of some of the things that come up with a caregiver child, right? I mean, a lot of things will fall on the shoulders of an adult child that's taking care of their parent, right? Sometimes they're leaving their job, right? Maybe they've left a career that they've had for years to care for an ailing parent. On the flip side, maybe it's an adult child that never really had a career. They've always lived with mom or they've always lived with dad. They've had jobs, but you know, they've always been a caregiver, right? They've been a caregiver to a lesser extent, and now all of a sudden they're a caregiver to a greater extent. And then you have situations where you've got kids that, you know, live across the country and they're doing their best to be, you know, that caregiver child, but they're gonna have to hire people to really come over here and, you know, and help out. And ultimately, it's just a situation where, and obviously we're talking more about situations where the caregiver child is local versus across the country, and being across the country presents different issues that we really won't talk about today. I'm just trying to give the idea that there are different versions of a caregiver child. It doesn't have to be like I live with mom or dad. It can be I'm a caregiving child that lives across the country and I'm coming in to visit here and there, and I'm checking in and I'm you know, organizing care for my mom or dad, and I'm coming in to join him or her on at doctor's visits and appointments, etc. I think one of the biggest things about being that caregiver child that's really, you know, making sure that mom or dad is being taken care of on a daily basis is making sure that you're utilizing all the appropriate resources out there. Caregiver children can very much fall into the trap, I'm going to say, that you know that a spouse who's become a caregiver falls into. Their life is put on hold, right? They're not seeing their friends anymore. They're not going out as much, whether they were going out a ton or not before, but their life now revolves around taking care of mom or dad. And this, you know, I understand this, and obviously it's important to care for our loved ones. But I always tell clients this, especially spouses more so, because, you know, as if we're talking about somebody being a caregiver for a spouse, we're likely talking about an older individual. And in this context, I don't normally, normally my definition of older is much older than what I'm about to say. But normally when we're talking about an older individual that we're having to care for from a spouse standpoint, we're probably talking about at least over 65 or 70 in most cases, okay? The vast majority of the time, the individual will be over 70 years old. Obviously, everybody that's attending today, you might know somebody that's been affected by some sort of illness prior to age 70. Obviously, I'm aware that happens. We've worked with clients in their late 40s and early 50s that have been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, early forms of dementia. It's so sad when it affects somebody that, I mean, obviously it's sad when it affects anybody, especially somebody that young. It's just some of those things that you don't think about, right? We look at Alzheimer's or any form of dementia as an older person's disease. And unfortunately it's not, okay? And so what can this caregiver child do, right? What can they do to help? And what are their concerns? And a lot of times the concerns are really two main categories, right? One is making sure that my mom or dad has the appropriate care. And knowing that I might be able to provide some of that care, but I shouldn't provide all that care, okay? And this is also what I say to spouses, especially to spouses, right? Because if I'm meeting with clients and I've got an 80-year-old woman taking care of her 85-year-old husband, what we've seen over the years is that 80-year-old woman will all of a sudden start to decline way faster than she would had she not been caregiving for her husband. And I always tell spouses, you need to be a wife, you need to be a husband. When you start being just a caregiver, you start to resent your spouse. And this goes for adult children too. It's no different. When you're a child taking care of your parents and you're doing this almost 24/7, there becomes some resentment. I'm sorry. It's a fact. I don't care how much you love your mom or dad. And you can tell me all you want that there's no resentment. I just won't believe you. It's because no matter what, we know that we're putting something on. We're not doing certain things that we want to do. We get frustrated, right? We know that it's not their fault. We know that for the most part, most medical issues that our loved ones deal with are not their fault. There are some that are. There are some that it was years and years of doing certain things that contributed to their health issues. But for most people, it's not, right? For most people, it's the onset of some disease that they couldn't help, that they had no control over. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that my mom or dad didn't have control over this illness they have. The fact that I'm taking care of them all day, the fact that I may be having to feed them, I'm having to prepare every single meal, I'm driving them to every single doctor appointment. Maybe I'm having to bathe them. Maybe I'm having to change their diapers. Again, even the sweetest of children or spouses will start to feel some form of resentment. It's natural, okay? It is. So we need to make sure that we're looking at what resources can help us, right? Everybody needs a little bit of respite, okay? So for that child caregiver that's at home, even though you might want to take care of mom or dad 24/7, think about your own mental health, okay? And think about the idea of mom or dad having some socialization with somebody else, right? Maybe there's a caregiver we can hire, and whether it's through a caregiving company or maybe it's somebody private, but maybe we can bring a caregiver in a little bit. Maybe it's a couple hours a day. Maybe there's 2 days a week where a caregiver comes in for the full day. Again, just sort of mixing it up, again, giving some different socialization to our loved one. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about mom or dad. I know I've been kind of transitioning to talking about spouses. There's some similar aspects here, and that's why I'm bringing that up. So one is really, again, even if you want to be that full-time caregiver, give yourself a break. You need it, okay? It's like working a full-time job. You need a vacation, and this is no different. And frankly, being a full-time caregiver is likely harder than most full-time jobs, okay? It's like taking care of 2 little kids at home, right? I'm going to say that every parent that's a stay-at-home parent, taking care of 2 kids or 3 kids at home is much harder than whatever their spouse is doing, 9 to 5, okay? Now, if we are hiring a caregiver, one thing that we want to be very conscious of is doing it the right way, okay? This is where I've seen a lot of issues over the years. So number one, if we're hiring a company, if we're hiring a caregiver through a company, then I typically don't see any issues here, right? We contact the company, we understand whatever their rates are. Excuse me. We're going to pay it. Now, when we hire a company, just so everybody knows, most caregiving companies right now, and there are tons of them, okay, the market is flooded with home care companies. When we are hiring a company nowadays, you are looking at probably an hourly rate that's going to be somewhere between $28 and $32 an hour. Okay. This has gone up quite a bit. When I started practicing in this area about 11 and a half years ago, it was like $20 to $24 an hour. So it's gone up quite a bit, right? So if we can afford it, the caregiving agencies are great because they're licensed, they're bonded, they're insured. If the caregiver that you have is sick, even if you love them so much and you don't want a replacement, at least if they're sick at the last minute, the company can replace them with somebody else who can fill in for them that day, right? Versus an adult child maybe having to take a day off of work or something that might not be very easy for the family to sort of have to shift things at the last minute. And so again, you have this, situation where, again, licensed, bonded, insured, you have backups available, et cetera. There's a lot of positives with the company. The biggest downside to hiring a company for most people will be the rate, right? Because while a company may charge $28 to $32 an hour, I've got clients that are paying people, under the table. They're paying private caregivers anywhere from $15 to $25 an hour. Okay. I get the idea of hiring a private caregiver, right? Because if you're going to pay somebody $20 an hour versus $30 an hour, and that can buy you, for the same amount of money, that can buy you an extra 50% of time with the caregiver on a monthly basis. And that makes a huge difference for a lot of people. Money doesn't grow on trees. Care is very expensive nowadays. I don't care if you're talking about a caregiver in the home, moving into a nursing home, assisted living, memory care, all of these forms of care now are a lot more expensive than they were 10 years ago. Okay, and they'll continue to go up. And while having long-term care insurance to offset these costs is great, I can tell you, for as long as I've been doing this, I can tell you that at least 90% of the clients I work with do not have long-term care insurance. Okay, and so they're paying for all of this out of pocket. So if we're going to hire that private caregiver, a couple things: you need to have a contract in place. Okay, you need to have something in writing that outlines, when this person started, how much they're going to be paid, how often they're going to be paid, maybe not how often, but how much they're going to be paid. Are they going to be paid a certain amount per hour, a certain amount per day? Okay, how much notice do they need to give if they don't want to work for you anymore? How much notice do you need to give them if you want to fire them? And then all the various duties and tasks that they're going to help out with. And we always err on the side of being overly broad. I'd rather put 100 things on a list of what the caregiver is going to do, even if they're only handling 30 of them, versus only naming a few, which will not cover everything they're going to do, right? We want to have a pretty robust description there of all the various activities, because certain things might come up. They just may not come up as often, right? Having a contract in place is really important. Number one, what if the caregiver starts to argue with us at some point down the road that we're not paying them the amount that we said they would, right? Well, at least we now have a contract to go off of saying, well, we agreed to this, we both signed this, and we can all see the number that we agreed to. That's one piece of it. The other side is, and this is because we do a lot of Medicaid work in our office, the other piece is that let's say that, I'm at home caring for my mom and dad. We've hired a caregiver to help out here and there so that I can get a break. I can go out and run errands or take care of things that I need to take care of, or just take a vacation or just take some time off. And so we've hired this caregiver, and all of a sudden dad is at a point, or mom, whoever I'm caring for, let's say a year down the road, is at a point where, the type of care they need is just more so than I can handle as an adult child taking care of them in the house. And I can't keep them at home, because if I had to pay a caregiver 24/7, it would be way more money than my mom or dad can afford. And so I need to move them into a nursing home. And I know that their money is going to run out after a couple months in the nursing home, right? And and they're going to need to apply for Medicaid. Well, when we apply for Medicaid in a nursing home, there's a 5-year look back period, okay, just so everybody understands this. So if I'm a single individual, I'm not going to go into tons of detail here, but I'll try to be pretty brief. If I'm a single individual, I'm entitled to have $2,000 in my name. That's the total of my checking, savings, money market accounts, stocks, bonds, investments, 401ks, IRAs, everything. Okay, I can have $2,000 in my name, and I can own a house, but I need to try to sell it. Okay, so if I'm applying for Medicaid as a single person, I need to sell my home. I can still get on Medicaid, but when my home sells, I'll get all that money back, and then I'll get temporarily kicked off Medicaid. I'll spend all that money down on my cost of care, and then when I'm back under $2,000, I can get back on Medicaid again. Okay, so just look at it this way. As a single person, you can have $2,000. If I'm married and I've got a spouse in the house, my spouse can have $109,560, $109,560. They can own the home, so the house can be in their name, and then they can have a car. Okay. And then there's certain income limitations as far as how much of my income I can keep and how much my spouse can keep. For purposes of the conversation today, I don't want to start going down that path. I want to make sure that we cover everything else. I just want to give you the gist of how Medicaid works. So we're entitled to keep a certain amount of assets, and as a single person, obviously you can see that the amount of assets I'm able to keep pretty minimal, $2,000. No real estate. Now, Medicaid also has a 5-year look-back period. What does that mean? That means that when I go to apply for Medicaid in the nursing home, Medicaid wants to see what did I do with my money over the last 5 years. And really what they're looking for is, did I give anything away? Well, I can tell you, because I've dealt with this. My partner and I have dealt with this, dealing with the state of Illinois. If I'm paying a caregiver privately, right? Because if I hire an agency, there's a contract in place, right? So when I file a Medicaid application, they're going to see that I was writing a check to, senior helpers every month for about $2,500, and then they'll likely ask for a copy of the contract, and we'll give it to them, and they'll see, okay, right, these payments were subject to the contract. But if I'm writing a check to Lydia, the caregiver, and there's no contract in place, Medicaid is going to take the stance, the state of Illinois will take the stance that I was just gifting money to some random person named Lydia, right? And I can say, Lydia is not my son or my daughter, Lydia is not a relative, Lydia is not a friend, Lydia was my caregiver. The state will not care. Their take on it will be that I'm gifting money to this person named Lydia, and I'm gifting money out of my estate so that I can lessen the value of my estate to apply for Medicaid. And so it's possible that we can get around this, but I can tell you right now that it's not easy. I can tell you that we've gotten around it. We've been in that situation, I think, twice. Once for sure. I think my partner was at one point. I can tell you my situation. I had a client paying a private caregiver, 2 private caregivers over the course of 5 years, probably to the tune, I think, of about $300,000 to $400,000. We went to apply for Medicaid, and they said, okay, you're approved, but we're going to give you a penalty. We're taking it. We're looking at this thinking that you gave away $350,000. Let's just say that was the number. And the cost of care at this nursing home that so-and-so is moving into is $10,000 a month. So while she's approved for Medicaid, she needs to figure out a way to pay for the next 35 months. Okay, the state takes the value of the gift, the amount that was technically gifted away, and they divide it by the monthly cost of care. And that's how many months they penalize you. Penalize you meaning how many months you have to figure out a way to pay out of your pocket before Medicaid will kick in. And so if I gave away $350,000, if my client gave away $350,000, and the cost of care was $10,000 a month, that client would have to figure out how to pay for 35 months. Well, in this situation, my client was down to $2,000 in her name, and she had $1,000 or so a month coming in from Social Security. So, I'll leave it to everybody on this in this call today to figure out how she was going to pay for 35 months worth of care. And so what do we have to do? Well, we scrambled, right? And I'm telling you the story a little bit differently. We were prepared. We knew what to expect. So what we had affidavits signed by the daughter of my client, because my client was incapacitated. So her daughter, as the power of attorney, signed an affidavit saying these were caregivers. These were not gifts. They were paid this much per hour. This is how many hours they worked per day, per week, for this many months, or for this many years. And then we had both caregivers sign affidavits saying, I'm so-and-so, I provided this care, this is how much I was paid, etc. Enough to, we got lucky. I'm going to say that we got lucky. It shouldn't seem like we got lucky. It should seem like we were being very honest and we gave the state all the information that would prove our case. But I can tell you that, again, the state's default is that this was gifted, that without a contract with the caregiver, the money was gifted. Okay, we had to go into an appeal, etc. And it was not easy. And I'll tell you that I talked to colleagues that were literally like, you got lucky. I've been in the same situation, and the state would not allow it. The state gave them a penalty. So I'm saying this, and I know I'm going into a lot of detail on it, but this is why having a contract with any private caregiver is important. So if you're going to hire that private caregiver, you need to have a contract. Whether you put the contract together yourself, whether you look to an elder law attorney such as us or any other elder law firm out there to help you put a contract together, it's necessary. Okay. Now, as we're talking about caregiver contracts, these don't just apply to private individuals that aren't related to your mom or dad. So we have a lot of situations that arise where the caregiver child, right? The topic of today's conversation, they are caring for mom and dad. In some cases, they have stopped working to care for mom and dad, mom or dad, or both. Okay. And so we see a couple different things in this situation. In some situations, we see a situation where mom or dad wants to pay their adult son or daughter. They understand, hey, they're not working anymore. They have no income coming in. Happy to pay them, and I'd rather have my son or daughter take care of me and pay them, and probably pay them a little less than hiring a company and having a company care for me, right? Somebody that I don't know. There's nothing wrong with paying your adult son or daughter to take care of you, but you need to have a contract. It's even more important with a blood relative, because trying to make the argument without a contract to the state of Illinois that your son or daughter was a caregiver is going to be tough. I don't care how much paperwork you can put together, how many affidavits are signed. It looks and smells a lot more fishy when you've been writing checks to a relative. I'm sure you guys would agree. So we need to make sure we have a contract in place. And typically, very typically, when we're hiring an adult son or daughter and we're putting a contract together, we're going to be conservative. We're not going to say, okay, well, the going rate is $28 to $32 an hour, so we're going to charge $28 an hour. Typically we're saying, maybe it's $20 an hour. But in a lot of cases, if that son or daughter is living with mom or dad and taking care of them, we're probably going to do a daily rate, right? We're probably going to say $150 a day, whatever that might be, right? Understanding that, yes, son or daughter is caring for them. In some situations, maybe they need true 24/7 care, but maybe it's just, hey, mom or dad needs me there, okay? And I'm not technically working 24 hours, but I'm there all day. I'm there helping them with whatever they need. And so we're going to figure out a daily rate that makes sense, okay? So in some situations, we're doing the child caregiver contract because the child actually needs the money to spend and to live on. In some cases, you have an adult child that may not need the money. And they're saying, listen, I'm not doing this for the money. I don't need the money. I'm happy to help take care of my mom or dad. In some of those situations, we might still create a caregiver contract. And here's why. Let's say mom or dad has $100,000 left, and we know that, listen, at some point, the adult son or daughter may not be able to care for them in the home anymore. And they may very well have to move out of the house and into a long-term care facility. And if they do that, they might run out of money and they might need to apply for Medicaid. But what we might do is we might say, well, you are providing care. We can create a caregiver contract. Mom or dad can pay you. And if you don't ever want to use that money for yourself, that's fine. But what we've done in some situations is that adult child has sort of held on to that money and kept it aside, because when mom or dad ended up moving out of the house and going into a nursing home and having to apply for Medicaid, now the son or daughter had this money that they could use for their mom or dad. Because again, if they're on Medicaid in a nursing home, they're down to $2,000. Well, now the son or daughter doesn't necessarily have to use their own money that they would have been out of pocket for. They've got, maybe this checking account with 40 grand in it that's rightfully theirs, but they can now use it for their mom or dad, right? Maybe there's, mom or dad wants a new TV for their room. Maybe they need new clothes. They want an iPad. They want, there's a certain meal that they would like, once a week or something like that. Again, if they're limited to that $2,000, having this sort of money on the side can be helpful. And so we've done it in that situation as well. And again, there is nothing wrong with doing it that way. Again, we're not making up a story that the child is providing care. This is a situation where care is being provided. The adult child is just saying, I'll get paid, but I'm going to kind of hold on to this money for mom or dad if they need it down the road. And obviously, if they don't need it, then the son or daughter will keep it, or they'll share it with their siblings, or whatever they decide to do. Okay. But this has worked out to be a good way to sort of put some money aside in the event that mom or dad ends up needing Medicaid down the road. When we're looking at and talking about Medicaid, there's a few things where one of these is very relative to a child caregiver. The other one is not really relative to a child caregiver, but I'll bring it up because I think it's helpful to know. So I mentioned that if I'm a single individual applying for Medicaid in a nursing home, I'm limited to $2,000. And I can't own a house, right? I mean, I can own it. It can be in my name. I can still apply for Medicaid and get approved. But Medicaid is going to require me to sell my home. And then when I sell it, again, like I said earlier, I'll have to spend down all the proceeds until I get down to $2,000. Well, there is and again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no gifting allowed, right? So in the 5 years before I apply for Medicaid, any money that I gift, if I were to gift my car to my son or daughter, there would be a penalty, right? Dollar for dollar, as we talked about. If I gift money, there would be a penalty, dollar for dollar. If I gift real estate, there would be a penalty, dollar for dollar. However, in the situation where I have an adult child that has been living with me and caring for me, so it has to be both of those. And it has to be a child. It cannot be a grandchild. An adult child that's not only been living with me, but taking care of me for at least 2 years, up until the time I move out of the house and apply for Medicaid in a nursing home. I can transfer my house to that adult child, and it does not count as a gift. Okay, it's a big exception to the gifting rule in Medicaid. Okay, so if I have an adult child that's been taking care of me and living with me, they cannot own their own house. Okay, I want to be very adamant about this. My son or daughter cannot have another house and they're just like staying with me 5 days a week. This has to be their house, and we're gonna have to show, a copy of their driver's license that has my address as their address, copies of their tax returns that show that as their primary residence. Okay, the state will ask for this paperwork, and typically we're also going to want to back it up with something from the doctor, because it's one thing to say that I was living with them. Again, there's some adult children that live with their parents and they're not taking care of them. They just live with them. And then one day, their mom or dad might have a stroke and go into the hospital and then go into rehab and then stay in the nursing home long term. But at no point in time was that adult child ever taking care of them, right? They were just living with them. So in addition to giving all this information to the state regarding this being my address as the adult child, we're also going to want to back it up with something from the doctor saying that, that I actually needed care for the last 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Obviously, the longer, the better our case is. So we're going to ideally want something from the doctor saying that this has been my patient for this many years. She's been declining over the years. She's needed, a level of care, at least to the level of assisted living, which is what the state will want to look at. Okay, so ideally, it's that the individual has needed the type of level of care similar to assisted living, and some doctors will even say, to my knowledge, their son or daughter has been living with them for 4 years and has been their primary caregiver. And so all of that information we get it to the state, we apply for Medicaid, we can transfer the house to that adult child. Okay. This is really important to understand. Again, it doesn't come up that often, but it does come up. It's come up a handful of times in our practice. One other thing, just to this, again, this is not so much adult child caregiver so much, but just for people to know, if I'm applying for Medicaid in a nursing home, and if I have an adult child that is a recipient of SSDI, okay, Social Security Disability, not SSI, okay, not SSI, not Supplemental Security Income, Social Security Disability. If I have an adult child receiving SSDI, I can transfer as much of my assets as I want to that adult child right before I apply for Medicaid, and it's not considered a gift that will impact me from a Medicaid standpoint. Okay, so again, not so much child caregiver related, but while we're on the topic of maybe an adult applying for Medicaid that has children, it's just something to consider. Okay, and again, that's come up a couple times in our practice as well. You know, where we had a client that would have had to spend $200,000 in the nursing home, but was able to gift a certain amount to her daughter. She still had to spend some money in the nursing home. Okay, just want everybody to understand that even though there are nursing homes that take Medicaid, even though we can transfer our assets according to some of these exceptions, even when a nursing home takes Medicaid, be prepared to spend a lot, not spend a lot, but spend some money. Your more desirable nursing homes that take Medicaid are probably going to want a couple months of private pay before they let you apply for Medicaid. So just something to keep in mind. I always tell clients, and this is very much planning for the caregiver child because this always happens. People wait until the last minute to move their loved one into a nursing home, right? We get calls all the time. Mom's down to $10,000. I've been taking care of her, or me and a private caregiver have been taking care of my mom for the last 3-4 years. Again, now she's down to $10,000, $15,000. We need to get her into a nursing home and apply for Medicaid. What can you do? We're not miracle workers. We'd like to think that we are. We'd love to help, and we can. But again, do what you can. Look at the writing on the wall, right? You see that your mom or dad that you've been caring for is down to 100,000. Now it's all of a sudden down to 60, 80, and then 60, and maybe it's very likely you're thinking, wow, mom and dad, mom or dad could live another 3, 4, 5 years or longer, right? We know that they're going to outlive their money. We know that they're going to have to move out of the house. Don't wait. Do not wait until the last minute. Be proactive. Clients always ask, what's the right amount of money where we should start looking at places out there? There's no steadfast rule. I tell clients, you know what? I would start looking at 100,000. If you don't have 100,000, if you're down to 50 or 60, you just start looking at $100,000 or less. At least understand your options. Understand what some of these nursing homes are requiring. You might find the right place, the place that you would ideally like to move your mom or dad, and realize you need to private pay for 6 months before they let Medicaid kick in. Again, be proactive. There's a lot on the shoulders of a child caregiver, and it gets overwhelming. But you need to seek advice. The longer you wait, and we know this, right? We know that when we procrastinate, we end up being in a crisis situation, and our options are less, and the costs typically increase. So my best advice is to be proactive, to seek advice, to get help, knowing that there's tons of people in your shoes that are dealing with things exactly that you're dealing with. There's caregiver support groups out there. There are so many resources, especially now for this sort of the senior for the senior issues that we're seeing. And I can tell you again, I haven't been doing this forever, but I've been doing this for almost 12 years now, and I can tell you how much I've seen this specific industry, just the industry that caters to seniors, expand in the 12 years, and the different types of services that are out there, the different professionals that are coming up. Even looking at things like my partner and I interviewed a cannabis nurse last week. or 2 weeks ago, right? Things that we weren't talking about 10, 12 years ago. So I really advise people to seek out the resources that are out there. You can always reach out to me. You can always let me know what you're dealing with. And if we can help, great. And if we are not the best fit, we can always, put people in touch with the folks that can help. Listen, for the sake of time, that's about all the information I want to cover today. I've got a few minutes, so I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions before we sign off. But hopefully you found the information today at least a little bit beneficial. Hopefully you got a little bit something out of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions from the group? I don't see anything in the chat. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email me or Matt Margolis. Matt, Matt, can you put your email in the?
Yeah, I will do it right now. I was just gonna do it. You got it.
Awesome. Matt's next talk, it will be next month. That is September 7th, Navigating the Long-Term Care Maze, the hidden costs and potential pitfalls of long-term care. So continuing the conversation into long-term care. I encourage you to check that out. Again, September 7th at 9:15, we'll be back here again, and everything's online. All of Matt's sessions through the end of the year are online, so you feel free to register and check those out. Our next program this week will be, this month will be on August 18th at noon, Heal Your Hip Pain Naturally. All right, thank you everyone. Feel free to check more information out at our website, nsymca.org/YES. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Thanks.
Bye guys. Thanks, man.
Bye. Good day, everyone.